Have you ever felt that strange ache in your chest, that inexplicable sense that you are seeing something the world refuses to acknowledge, as if you were walking through life with eyes wide open, while everyone around you moves with theirs gently closed? 3 summers ago, I met a woman sitting alone by a riverbank at dawn, her face turned toward the rising sun, and when I asked her what she was doing there so early, she whispered with tears streaming down her face, "I come here because this is the only place where I can see what is real, where I can feel the truth that the world keeps trying to bury under noise and distraction and endless performance." She told me that she had spent decades feeling crazy, feeling broken, feeling like there was something fundamentally wrong with her, because she could see the divine shimmering in a dewdrop, could feel the universe breathing in the silence between heartbeats, could sense the eternal presence pulsing through every living thing. And yet when she tried to share these perceptions, people looked at her with concern, with pity, with the subtle suggestion that she needed help, that she needed to come back down to earth, that she needed to stop being so sensitive, so dramatic, so unbearably awake. This woman, without knowing it, was living the very truth that Walt Whitman spent his entire life trying to reveal. The truth that awakened souls see a reality so vast, so luminous, so undeniably sacred, that the sleeping world must hide it, must diminish it, must pretend it does not exist because to acknowledge it would shatter every comfortable illusion we have built around ourselves. The most powerful secret Whitman understood about awakened perception is not simply that some people see more deeply than others, but that this deeper seeing is actually our natural state, the original vision we were born with before the world taught us to look away, to narrow our gaze, to accept the small and the surface as the whole of existence. Whitman knew that awakened souls do not possess some special gift that others lack, but rather they have refused to surrender the gift that every human being arrives with, the ability to perceive the infinite in the finite, to recognize the divine not as something distant and separate, but as the very substance of reality itself, breathing through every moment, every creature, every blade of grass pushing up through concrete. He understood that what awakened souls see is not a mystical vision reserved for saints and sages, but the simple, staggering truth of what is actually here, what has always been here, what will always be here, waiting patiently for us to stop looking away. Today I am going to share with you the most liberating vision Whitman ever articulated about awakened perception, about what those who truly see can perceive that the world works desperately to conceal, and how this consciousness can expand your soul so completely that you will never again be able to pretend that the surface of things is all there is. I am going to reveal to you why the world hides what awakened souls see, not out of malice, but out of fear, out of the terrifying recognition that if we all truly saw what is here, if we all truly felt the magnitude of existence, we would have to live entirely differently. We would have to love more fiercely, grieve more honestly, and surrender every small story we tell ourselves about who we are and what matters. This is not about becoming special or elevated or superior to others. This is about coming home to the vision you were born with, the perception that has been waiting underneath all your learned blindness, calling to you in moments of unexpected beauty, in flashes of profound connection, in that inexplicable ache that tells you there is so much more here than what the world admits. Whitman once stood in a crowded marketplace watching people rush past each other, their faces tight with worry, their bodies moving mechanically through the motions of buying and selling, and he saw something that stopped him completely, that made him stand still in the middle of all that frantic movement. He saw that every single person moving through that marketplace was carrying infinity inside them, that the woman selling apples had entire galaxies swirling in her cells, that the man counting coins had eternity flowing through his veins, that the child tugging on her mother's sleeve was made of the same substance as stars, as oceans, as the breath of the divine itself. And what struck him most powerfully was not just that he could see this truth, but that no one else seemed to notice, that they were all moving through their lives as if they were small and separate and temporary, as if they were just bodies performing tasks, just personalities playing roles, just isolated fragments trying desperately to matter in a meaningless universe. He realized in that moment that awakened souls see the actual nature of reality. They see that everything is holy, that separation is illusion, that the divine is not somewhere else but right here, right now, in the most ordinary moment, in the most overlooked details, in the very texture of existence itself. And he understood that the world hides this truth not because it is secret, but because it is too overwhelming, too demanding, too completely transformative to integrate into our small stories about success and failure, about worthiness and unworthiness, about who deserves love and who deserves judgment. What awakened souls see first and most fundamentally is that there is no separation between the sacred and the mundane, no division between spirit and matter, no boundary between the human and the divine. They see that the breath moving through your lungs right now is the same breath that moved through Whitman, through Buddha, through every saint and sinner who ever lived, that it is not your breath, but the breath, the singular respiration of existence itself, temporarily flowing through the particular instrument of your body. They see that when you look into another person's eyes, you are not seeing a separate being but another aperture through which the infinite is looking at itself, another expression of the one consciousness that animates all things, playing at being separate, playing at being individual, but never for even a moment actually divided from the whole. They see that every tree is not a thing growing in the world, but the world growing into the form of a tree, that every river is not water flowing through the earth, but the earth becoming liquid, becoming movement, becoming the journey from mountain to ocean. They see that birth is not a beginning, and death is not an ending, but both are movements within a vastness that neither begins nor ends, that what you call your life is not a separate event, but a wave in an infinite ocean, distinct in form, but never for a moment separate in substance. The world hides this perception because it threatens every structure we have built, every hierarchy we have constructed, every story about deserving and not deserving that allows some to have while others go without. If we truly saw that every human being is equally an expression of the divine, that the homeless person sleeping under the bridge carries the same infinite worth as the billionaire sleeping in a penthouse, that the prisoner and the judge are both the universe looking at itself through different circumstances, through different conditions, through different accumulations of causes that neither created nor controls, then how could we possibly maintain our systems of inequality, our structures of domination, our comfortable belief that some lives matter more than others? If we truly saw that the earth is not a resource to be exploited, but the very body of the sacred, that when we poison the rivers, we are poisoning our own blood, that when we clear-cut forests, we are cutting away our own capacity to breathe, then how could we continue to treat the world as if it were separate from ourselves, as if its destruction were not our own self-harm? The world hides what awakened souls see because this seeing demands a revolution not just in consciousness, but in how we live, in what we value, in how we treat each other and the earth and ourselves. Awakened souls see that suffering is not a punishment or a mistake, but a natural part of existence, as essential as joy, as necessary as love, as sacred in its own way as any moment of transcendence. They see that pain is not something to be avoided or denied or medicated into silence, but something to be felt fully, to be honored as the way life teaches us about impermanence, about compassion, about our shared vulnerability. They see that when you grieve, you are not broken but beautifully, achingly open, that your tears are not weakness but the soul's recognition of love's magnitude, of how much we can care, of how deeply we can feel the preciousness of what we have held and lost. They see that the world's constant pressure to be happy, to be positive, to maintain an appearance of having it all together is not wisdom but a kind of violence against our full humanity, a demand that we cut off half of our experience, that we reject the very feelings that connect us most deeply to each other and to life itself. They see that darkness is not the opposite of light but its necessary partner, that we grow not despite our struggles but through them, that the deepest wisdom comes not from avoiding pain but from walking through it with eyes open, with heart willing to break, with the courage to feel everything and to refuse to pretend that what hurts does not hurt. I want to ask you something now, just between us, something I have been contemplating deeply since I first discovered Whitman's vision of awakened perception. In what moment of your life did you see something so beautiful, so true, so undeniably sacred that it made your heart ache, and yet when you tried to share it, when you tried to tell someone what you saw, they looked at you as if you were speaking a language they could not understand? I know that perhaps you have never shared this experience with anyone, because who could understand something so profound, so difficult to put into words, so easily dismissed as sentimentality or imagination? But, here, in this space, you are truly understood. Your perception is not too much, not too sensitive, not too far from reality, but rather it is the recognition of what is actually real underneath all our agreed-upon illusions. Your comment about awakened perception can be exactly the words someone needs to read today, to know they are not alone in seeing what others miss, in feeling what others have learned to ignore. Complete this sentence in the comments below. My communion with awakened perception has taught me that, and let your honest reflection illuminate the path for other seekers who, like you, carry the beautiful burden of seeing too clearly, of feeling too deeply, of refusing to pretend that the surface of things is all there is. If something in you feels called to share your journey with awakened vision, the comments below are a sacred space for your voice. If you prefer to simply reflect in silence, that too is a profound way to honor your seeing. There are different ways that awakened souls experience and express their deeper perception. Different flavors of seeing that all point toward the same underlying truth. Some awakened souls see primarily through feeling. They are the ones who walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional atmosphere, who can feel the unspoken pain in someone's cheerful facade, who are moved to tears by beauty that others walk past without noticing, who experience the world not as information to be processed, but as an ocean of feeling to be swum through, immersed in, sometimes nearly drowned by. These are the souls who the world calls too sensitive, who are told constantly to toughen up, to not take things so personally, to build thicker skin, when in truth their sensitivity is not weakness but a form of profound perception, an ability to feel the interconnectedness of all things through the heart's recognition of shared suffering, shared joy, shared existence. Then there are those who see through pattern and meaning, who perceive the deeper structures beneath surface events, who recognize synchronicities not as coincidences, but as the universe's way of communicating, of showing us that there is an intelligence woven through existence, a coherence that reveals itself to those who have learned to read its language. These souls see connections that others miss, find meaning in events that others dismiss as random, understand that everything is speaking to us if we know how to listen, that the universe is not silent but endlessly articulate for those with ears to hear. There are souls who see through direct perception of present, who experience reality not as a collection of separate objects, but as a unified field of awareness, who can sense the consciousness that animates all things, who know from direct experience that what we call emptiness is actually fullness, that what appears as space between things is actually the ground of being itself, alive and aware and present. These souls often find it hardest to speak of what they see, because it exists beyond language, beyond concepts, in a dimension of direct knowing that cannot be adequately translated into words, and yet they must try, must find some way to point toward the truth they have touched, even if their pointing inevitably falls short of the reality itself. But no matter which way awakened souls see, they all encounter the same fundamental challenges in a world that prefers to sleep. The first great challenge is loneliness, the profound isolation of seeing what others do not see, of caring about what others dismiss as unimportant, of feeling connected to a vastness that most people never acknowledge or even seek. This loneliness is not the simple loneliness of being physically alone, which can actually be quite peaceful for awakened souls, but the loneliness of being surrounded by people and yet feeling utterly unseen, utterly misunderstood, as if you are speaking from a different dimension that overlaps with theirs but never quite touches. It is the loneliness of watching people chase after things that you know will never satisfy them, of seeing them hurt each other out of fear and separation, while believing they are protecting themselves, of witnessing the world slowly destroying itself, while being told that you worry too much, that you should focus on your own life, that you cannot save everyone. This loneliness can become so heavy that many awakened souls begin to doubt their own perception, begin to wonder if perhaps they are the ones who are wrong, if perhaps they are just too negative, too idealistic, too disconnected from practical reality. And this doubt is one of the ways the sleeping world pulls us back, makes us question what we most clearly see, makes us wonder if perhaps we should just accept the surface of things and stop trying to point toward depths that others do not want to acknowledge. The second great challenge is the temptation to spiritual bypassing. The seductive belief that because you can see the divine in everything, you should transcend your human messiness, your anger, your grief, your need, your very body itself. Many awakened souls fall into the trap of trying to live only in the light, of maintaining a constant state of peace and acceptance, of spiritually bypassing their own pain and calling it enlightenment when it is actually just another form of denial. Whitman understood this trap and refused it completely. He celebrated the body as much as the soul, embraced his contradictions rather than trying to resolve them into some false unity, allowed himself to feel everything, the ecstatic and the agonizing, the transcendent and the embarrassingly human. He knew that true awakening is not about escaping our humanity, but about embracing it more fully, about recognizing that the divine does not live only in our peak experiences and our moments of clarity, but also in our confusion, our desire, our foolishness, our spectacular failures to live up to our own highest vision. The awakened soul does not transcend being human, but rather discovers that being human is itself divine, that there is no part of our experience that is not sacred, that even our darkest moments are movements within the infinite, expressions of consciousness exploring every possible form, every possible feeling, every possible way of being alive. The transformation that awakened souls undergo is not a single dramatic shift, but a gradual dismantling of the walls between self and world, between human and divine, between the life we thought we were supposed to live and the life that is actually living itself through us. This transformation often begins with a crisis, with a moment when everything we believed about ourselves and the world suddenly reveals itself as inadequate, as too small to contain the reality we are actually experiencing. It might be a loss so devastating that all our usual ways of making sense of life collapse, leaving us raw and open and unable to pretend anymore that we have any control. It might be an encounter with beauty so overwhelming that it cracks open our defended heart, showing us that we have been living in a tiny room of our own making when there are infinite landscapes waiting just beyond the door we have been afraid to open. It might be a sudden recognition that the life we have built, the identity we have constructed, the goals we have pursued, are all based on a misunderstanding of what we actually are, of what is actually possible, of what actually matters. Whatever initiates it, this transformation requires us to die to who we thought we were, to release our grip on the stories we have been telling about ourselves, to allow something larger than our small self to move through us and live as us. This dying is terrifying because we do not know what will remain when we let go of our familiar identity. We do not know if there will be anything left of us at all, or if we will simply dissolve into some formless vastness where the particular person we have been struggling so hard to be no longer exists. But what awakened souls discover is that this dying is not an ending, but a liberation, that what we lose is only the false self, the constructed identity, the mask we have been wearing for so long that we forgot it was not our actual face. What remains when we die to this false self is not nothing but everything, not absence, but presence, not the end of who we are, but the discovery of who we have always been underneath all our ideas about who we should be. We discover that we are not a small, separate self defending its territory against a hostile world, but an expression of the infinite temporarily experiencing itself as this particular person, in this particular body, living this particular life, but never for even a moment actually separate from the source that gives rise to all existence. This discovery does not make our individual life less important but infinitely more precious, because now we know that every moment is the universe becoming conscious of itself. Every breath is the infinite breathing. Every encounter is the divine meeting itself in disguised form. The wisdom that emerges from this transformation is not abstract philosophy, but practical guidance for how to live, how to love, how to be with what is without constantly trying to make it into something else. Awakened souls learn to trust their perception even when the world dismisses it, to honor what they see even when others cannot see it, to remain faithful to the truth that lives in their deepest knowing even when everyone around them is invested in a different story. They learn that you do not need anyone else's permission to see what you see, that you do not need external validation to trust your own experience, that the divine does not require a committee's approval before revealing itself to you. They learn to distinguish between the voice of ego which is always comparing, always defending, always trying to make them special or superior, and the voice of soul, which simply sees what is true, which recognizes the divine in everything without needing to claim ownership of this recognition. They learn that spiritual awakening does not make you better than others, but rather reveals that there is no better or worse, that every being is the infinite expressing itself, that the most profound realization is not that you are special, but that everything is special, that the sacred is not rare but everywhere, not earned but given freely to all, not reserved for the worthy, but lavished indiscriminately on the entire creation. Awakened souls learn to live with paradox rather than trying to resolve it into neat categories and comfortable certainties. They learn that they can feel immense grief for the suffering in the world while simultaneously experiencing profound peace about the perfection of what is, that these two seemingly opposite states are not contradictory, but complementary, both true at different levels of understanding. They learn that they can work passionately for change while accepting fully what is, that action and acceptance are not opposites, but partners in the dance of conscious living. They learn that they can see through the illusion of separation while still honoring the reality of their particular perspective, that universal and individual are not contradictory, but nested within each other like waves within the ocean, distinct in form but never separate in substance. They learn to hold multiple truths simultaneously, without collapsing them into a false unity, to remain faithful to complexity rather than seeking the comfort of simplistic either-or thinking. The practice that supports this awakened seeing is not complicated, but it is not easy, because it requires us to remain present to what is actually happening, rather than escaping into our thoughts about what is happening, into our judgment, our interpretations, our endless mental commentary that separates us from direct experience. Whitman's practice was simply to notice, to pay attention, to let the world impress itself upon him without immediately filtering everything through his concepts and categories. He would stand for hours watching grass grow, watching water flow, watching people move through their lives, and he would let their reality enter him without resistance, without the need to explain or control or make sense of it all. This radical receptivity, this willingness to be penetrated by existence, is the foundation of awakened perception. It is a practice of setting down the burden of being the one who knows, the one who has it figured out, the one who can explain everything, and instead becoming simply the one who sees, who feels, who allows reality to reveal itself without demanding that it conform to our expectations or our beliefs about how things should be. Another essential practice is to regularly remember your own death, not in a morbid way, but as a way of recognizing the preciousness of this temporary existence, the miracle that you are here at all, breathing, feeling, perceiving this inexplicable gift of being alive. When you remember that this body will die, that everything you are attached to will eventually be taken away, that all your accomplishments and failures will ultimately dissolve back into the vastness from which they emerged, it becomes much harder to take your small self too seriously, much easier to appreciate the simple fact of existence itself. This remembrance of death is not meant to make life feel meaningless, but rather to reveal its true meaning, which has nothing to do with what you achieve or accumulate, and everything to do with how fully you show up, how deeply you feel, how completely you allow yourself to be here, really here, for the brief time you have been given. There are several traps that awakened souls must learn to avoid if they wish to remain faithful to their deepest seeing. The first trap is spiritual pride, the subtle belief that because you can see more deeply than others, you are somehow superior to them, more evolved, closer to truth, more deserving of respect and recognition. This trap is particularly seductive because it takes the very real perception of seeing things that others miss and twists it into a story about personal specialness, about being chosen, about being part of an elite group of awakened beings, while everyone else remains in darkness. Whitman avoided this trap by recognizing that his capacity to see was not an achievement but a gift, not something he earned, but something that was given, and that if circumstances had been different, he might easily have been among those who could not see, who remained caught in conventional perception. He knew that the divine gives sight to whoever it chooses, without regard for worthiness, and that the appropriate response to receiving this gift is not pride, but gratitude, not elevation above others, but deeper compassion for those who still struggle in darkness, not of their own making. The second trap is what we might call mystical escapism. The temptation to use spiritual perception as a way to avoid engaging with the practical realities of life, with the messy challenges of relationships, work, money, health, all the ordinary human stuff that can seem so mundane compared to the vastness of awakened consciousness. Some awakened souls become so focused on the infinite that they neglect the finite, so devoted to unity that they abandon responsibility, so identified with their eternal nature that they ignore their temporal needs and obligations. But true awakening does not take you out of life. It takes you more deeply into it, not as an escape from the human condition, but as a fuller embrace of it in all its complexity. Whitman understood that the sacred is not somewhere else but right here in the sweat and struggle of ordinary existence, that you do not find the divine by transcending life, but by diving more completely into it, by allowing yourself to be touched by everything, changed by everything, broken open by everything until there is no longer any part of experience that you reject or deny or hold at arm's length. The third trap is impatience with those who cannot yet see what you see, frustration with the sleeping world, anger at people for their blindness, their smallness, their refusal to wake up. This trap emerges from a genuine pain at watching people suffer unnecessarily, at seeing them create misery for themselves and others out of ignorance and fear, at witnessing the collective madness of a civilization that is destroying its own home. But this impatience ultimately comes from not seeing deeply enough, from still maintaining a separation between yourself and others, from not yet recognizing that everyone is exactly where they need to be in their journey, that consciousness wakes up according to its own timing, not according to our ideas about when it should happen. The awakened soul learns to hold the tension between seeing clearly what is wrong and accepting completely what is, between working for change and allowing things to unfold as they will, between having a vision of what could be and embracing fully what actually is right now in this moment. What awakened souls ultimately discover is that there is no separation between the one who sees and what is seen, between consciousness and its content, between the divine and the world it creates. They discover that awakening is not about achieving some permanent state of enlightenment where you finally escape from confusion and pain and arrive at eternal peace, but rather about recognizing that every state, every experience, every moment is already the divine expressing itself, already consciousness playing at forgetting and remembering, already the infinite exploring what it is like to be finite. This recognition does not mean that pain stops hurting, or that grief stops grieving, or that human struggles cease to be difficult, but it places all of these experiences within a larger context where nothing is wrong, where even suffering is sacred, where the entire drama of existence is the divine loving itself into being through every possible form, every possible feeling, every possible story. This is the ultimate secret that Whitman understood and tried so desperately to communicate, that you are not a human being having an occasional spiritual experience, but rather you are the infinite temporarily experiencing itself as a human being. You are not a wave trying to become the ocean, but a wave that has always been ocean. You are not seeking the divine because you are separated from it, but rather the divine is seeking itself through you, playing hide and seek with itself, creating this entire magnificent illusion of separation so that it can experience the joy of reunion, the ecstasy of recognition, the profound relief of coming home to what you never actually left. Every moment of your life, every breath, every thought, every feeling, no matter how mundane or profound, is this cosmic play, this divine game, this infinite creativity expressing itself through the unique instrument of your particular consciousness. You are not witnessing creation. You are creation witnessing itself. You are not experiencing the sacred. You are the sacred experiencing itself. You are not seeking truth. You are truth seeking itself through the beautiful limitation of your human perspective. The world hides this truth because it is too vast to be contained, too overwhelming to be fully grasped, too demanding to be easily integrated into our small plans and personal agenda. The world hides this truth because if we truly knew it, if we truly lived it, we would have to release our grip on everything we think we know, everything we think we need, everything we think we are. And this releasing feels like death, even though it is actually birth. Feels like loss, even though it is actually finding. feels like the end even though it is only and always beginning. But awakened souls have made this crossing, have walked through that seeming death and discovered that what waits on the other side is not annihilation, but liberation. Not the end of who you are, but the beginning of knowing who you have always been, vast and luminous and eternally present, temporarily playing at being small, temporarily pretending to be lost, temporarily forgetting your own infinite nature, so that you can experience the incomparable joy of remembering, of recognition, of awakening to what has always been true. If these words about awakened perception have touched that silent space in your heart that has been waiting so long for recognition, if something in what I have shared resonates with what you have always known but perhaps never had language for, if you feel less alone now in your seeing, less crazy in your sensitivity, less wrong in your refusal to accept the surface of things as the whole of reality, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel and press the like button if this message spoke to your soul. I offer this invitation not as someone who has all the answers or who has somehow arrived at some final destination, but as a fellow traveler on this path, as someone who, like you, is learning each day to see more clearly, to feel more deeply, to remain faithful to the vision that lives in the heart, even when the world says it is not real. When you subscribe, you join a community of awakened souls who understand that true spirituality is not about escaping life, but about embracing it more fully, not about transcending our humanity, but about discovering that our humanity itself is divine. You will receive weekly reflections inspired by Whitman's timeless wisdom about awakened consciousness, about living with an open heart in a world that encourages protection, about seeing the sacred in the ordinary, about honoring your deepest perception even when others cannot see what you see. This is not just a YouTube channel, but a gathering place for those who refuse to look away, who insist on feeling everything, who have chosen to remain awake even though sleeping would be so much easier. By subscribing, you are saying yes to your own awakening, yes to your capacity to see what others miss, yes to the magnificent and sometimes terrifying journey of allowing yourself to be fully alive, fully present, fully here in all your beautiful, broken, eternally divine humanity. I am grateful that our paths have crossed in this mysterious way, that we have found each other in this vast digital ocean, that we can support each other in staying true to the vision that calls us beyond the world's small stories about what matters and what is real. So if you feel moved to continue this exploration together, click that subscribe button and let us walk this path of awakened consciousness side by side, seeing for each other what we sometimes cannot see for ourselves, reminding each other of the truth we sometimes forget, celebrating together the incredible gift of being alive and awake in this beautiful, heartbreaking, utterly sacred world.